The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. People were finishing up their daily errands, and the small cafe at the corner was alive with its usual chatter. The sound of cups clinking, conversations blending into the background, and the warm scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. But then, just as things seemed peaceful, a shift in energy occurred. A group of young men, laughing loud and carefree, barged into the cafe, their presence almost immediately commanding attention. The atmosphere changed instantly. A few heads turned, but most people kept to themselves, continuing with their meals or drinks. Nothing unusual yet, right? But then, she walked in. Sarah, a young woman in a wheelchair, entered the cafe with her friends. She smiled as she approached the counter, greeted the barista, and made her way toward a table. But her calmness was short-lived. The group of men had already noticed her. One of them couldn't resist making a cutting remark. "Well, look at that. What's a girl like you doing out here? Shouldn't you be home playing with your dolls or something?" The entire cafe went silent. The weight of the words hung in the air. Sarah, trying to keep her composure, tightened her grip on the handles of her wheelchair. Her face turned red, a mixture of embarrassment and anger, but she said nothing. She just looked away, trying to pretend as if the cruelty wasn't affecting her. The other two men joined in, their laughter echoing through the room. One of them leaned in closer, his voice dripping with mockery. "Bet you need help just to get out of bed, huh?" The laughter of the three bullies intensified, almost like a chant. Sarah's friends tried to speak up, but their voices barely reached above the noise. The bullies were relentless, enjoying every second of their torment. The cafe remained frozen. A few customers shifted in their seats, but no one stood up. Everyone stayed silent, avoiding confrontation. The fear of standing up to the bullies was palpable. But then, the door to the cafe opened with a sudden gust of wind, and everyone turned to look. In walked a tall figure, his presence unmistakable. His military uniform was impeccable, and his posture screamed authority. His eyes scanned the room, locking onto the situation without hesitation. This wasn't just another customer. This was Sarah's father. Sarah's father didn't rush. He stood at the door for a moment, taking in the situation with a calm, calculating gaze. The three bullies hadn't noticed him yet. They were too busy mocking his daughter, their words like daggers aimed at her heart. "Sarah, don't listen to them," one of her friends whispered softly, but it was hardly audible over the sound of the taunts. Sarah felt herself shrinking in her seat. Each word felt like it was pushing her further into the chair, making her feel smaller and smaller. She'd been used to stares, to the whispers behind her back, but this was different. This was open humiliation. "Look at her," one of the bullies sneered. "Does she even know how to smile? Or is she just here for pity?" One of them leaned in too close, his breath hot on her ear. "You must need someone to carry you everywhere, huh?" Sarah's hands gripped the wheels of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. She wanted to shout, to tell them to stop, but the words got stuck in her throat. Her cheeks burned with shame. Her heart raced in a panic she couldn't control. Her friends tried to intervene, but the bullies didn't even acknowledge them. The other customers in the cafe stared, too frightened to get involved. The fear of confrontation kept them silent. The bullies were the predators, and Sarah? She was their prey. Then something changed. Sarah's father stepped forward. The sound of his boots hitting the floor seemed louder than it was, but it commanded attention. His gaze was steady and unwavering, scanning the bullies with an intensity that made them stop in their tracks. "You three," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. "You have 5 seconds to leave before I make you regret it." For a brief moment, the bullies froze, taken aback by the authority in his voice. They exchanged confused glances, but none of them moved. They laughed, nervously this time, unsure of what to do. "Who do you think you are, old man?" one of them sneered, taking a step forward. Sarah's father didn't flinch. His gaze didn't waver. 5 seconds. Get moving. The tension in the room thickened, a silence filled with anticipation. People watched, unsure of how this would unfold. At this point, the situation has reached a boiling point. The bullies feel challenged, and the viewers are waiting for the father to step in and defend his daughter. The confrontation will escalate quickly, keeping the audience on the edge of their seats, anticipating justice being served. The first bully let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Oh, please. You think you can scare us? Maybe you should just go back to playing soldier and leave us alone." Sarah's father didn't blink. His posture remained solid, unwavering. I said, 5 seconds. The 3 young men exchanged glances, but this time, it was clear they were no longer so sure of themselves. One of them, now more arrogant than ever, stood up and puffed out his chest. "What's he gonna do, huh? Threaten us with your old medals?" He laughed, clearly overestimating his bravado. The father didn't respond with words. Instead, he made his move. In a split second, he grabbed the bully's wrist, twisting it with such force that the young man yelped in pain. He slammed the boy's arm onto the table with a strength that stunned everyone in the cafe. The second bully, realizing they weren't dealing with an ordinary man, took a step back. "What the hell, man? You're crazy." But Sarah's father didn't react. His voice was firm, unwavering. "That's one. Who's next?" The remaining 2 bullies froze. The entire cafe held its breath. People were pulling out their phones, some even applauding quietly, while others were too scared to move. Sarah, though, felt a surge of hope. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. One of the other bullies tried to make a move, but before he could, Sarah's father grabbed him by the collar and threw him back into his seat. The bully gasped for air, struggling to understand what had just happened. The third young man, now visibly shaken, dropped his cocky demeanor and took a step back. "You don't get it," he muttered, trying to regain some sense of control. "This is all just a joke, okay?" Sarah's father remained silent. He looked at the bully directly, his voice cold and firm. "You think this is a joke? The joke's on you." The cafe erupted in murmurs. People began clapping, cheering for Sarah's father. It was clear that, for the first time that day, justice was being served. This is where the conflict reaches its resolution. The father's intervention has turned the tables. He stands up for Sarah, and the audience feels the sense of relief and justice that follows. The 3 bullies had finally realized they were outmatched. Their bravado had crumbled. The customers in the cafe, once silent, now spoke in hushed tones, a mixture of relief and satisfaction spreading through the room. Sarah's father turned to face her. He knelt down in front of her, taking her hands gently in his. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner," he said, his voice full of regret. But there was also pride in his eyes. Sarah's face was streaked with tears, but these weren't the same tears from earlier. These were tears of relief, of gratitude. She looked up at him and whispered, "It's okay, Dad. You're here now." Her father smiled softly, his heart swelling with pride. He had always taught her to stand up for herself, but this time, he had stood for her. Now that the conflict is over, the final section should leave the viewers with a strong message about respect, justice, and standing up for others. This is where we invite the audience to engage and reflect on what they've just watched. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. The world needs more stories like this. Stories where we take a stand for what's right, where we choose respect over cruelty, and where justice triumphs. Sarah may have felt alone for a moment, but by the end of the day, she knew she would never be silenced again. And neither should you. The first bully let out a loud, mocking laugh. Oh, please. You think you can scare us? Maybe you should just go back to playing soldier and leave us alone. Sarah's father didn't blink. His posture remained solid, unwavering. I said, 5 seconds. The 3 young men exchanged glances, but this time, it was clear they were no longer so sure of themselves. One of them, now more arrogant than ever, stood up and puffed out his chest. What's he gonna do, huh? Threaten us with your old medals? He laughed, clearly overestimating his bravado. The father didn't respond with words. Instead, he made his move. In a split second, he grabbed the bully's wrist, twisting it with such force that the young man yelped in pain. He slammed the boy's arm onto the table with a strength that stunned everyone in the cafe. The second bully, realizing they weren't dealing with an ordinary man, took a step back. What the hell, man? You're crazy. But Sarah's father didn't react. His voice was firm, unwavering. That's one. Who's next? The remaining 2 bullies froze. The entire cafe held its breath. People were pulling out their phones, some even applauding quietly, while others were too scared to move. Sarah, though, felt a surge of hope. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. One of the other bullies tried to make a move, but before he could, Sarah's father grabbed his side.